Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Craftsman string trimmer. This one is a model WS215. It's an MTD built machine. It may look a lot like your Cub Cadet or Troy built trimmer, maybe some others. Customer complaint is that it won't start. So the first thing I always do is look in the fuel tank. And you saw that I gave it the sniff test and the fuel smelt good. I'd like to look in the tank and see if there's any water in the bottom of it, and examine the fuel filter and pressure test the fuel line. In this case, this fuel line is in such good shape and the barbs on the filter are so big that I'm not going to be able to remove this filter without wrecking something. The lines look really good. I doubt there's a hole in there. If I'm wrong, we can always come back to this step. You can see that the primer mechanism seems to be working. Yes, I know, it's a purge bulb. That seems to be working. So we're going to just move along. We can always come back to this step if we have to. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the starting procedure. So it says to press the primer 10 times, and then we flip the choke lever, and then we pull till it starts. So let's see if we can get this going. You notice I was putting my ear up to the machine and listening close because it didn't sound normal. If you work on these things every day, you can pick up on that. If you've owned a machine for a while and now all of a sudden it sounds different, you might pick up on that. I'm not familiar with this particular machine in the sense that I work on a lot of them. It just sounded a little bit odd to me. My next step is to look in the cylinder. We're looking at the spark plug, and first of all, we notice that the plug is dry. Well, we just hit that purge ball 10 times and pulled on the cord. Now, that's a big clue that that plug is dry. Just for giggles, we're going to check the compression. If we can hit 100 pounds on almost any piece of equipment, I would say that's enough to start the machine. And we just hit 100. Might just be over or right on 100 pounds. Let's see, get a closer look here. Yeah, 99, whatever. It should start. But it doesn't, and the plug is dry. What about spark? Even if we do have spark, if we have a dry plug and no fuel coming into the engine, it's not going to matter how much spark we got, right? But we do have good spark. So we sniff tested the fuel in the tank. We checked for spark. We know the purge system's working. But the plug was dry. What do you think is the problem here? Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pour some fuel down the carburetor. If there's something wrong with the carb and fuel's not going through it, the plug would be dry. So we're going to just force fuel right through the venturi of the carb and into the engine and see if we can get it to pop. Choked it. Nothing. It didn't even pop. We know we had spark. We're going to look at this plug again and see if it's wet or dry. It's still dry. So if you know anything about how a 2-cycle engine works, you know why that plug is still dry or where to look. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. But basically, if you have a major air leak and it's easier to pull air through that leak than through the carburetor, which has a closed throttle plate, so there's some restriction there. You know, if your air leak is so big that it pulls easier than pulling through the carburetor, then you're not going to pull fuel. And if you did pour fuel down into the engine and you have a major air leak in a certain spot, then you're not going to push that fuel up through the transfers into the combustion chamber. So we took the engine cover off, and on the end of the engine here we have this black plastic cap. You might be able to see the problem. It's a little bit dark. But I'm going to pull this cap off and show you what we got going on. There's 2 screws holding this one in place. It's not much of a cap. Some of them are made of metal and they're more durable. This one's plastic. T20 Torx screws holding it in. Then we just got to kind of pry it out of here. There's going to be an O-ring holding it in place. You see that hole in there? That hole's not supposed to be there. That is a supermassive air leak. If it's easier when the piston goes up, if it's easier to pull air through that hole than through the carburetor, then you're never going to pull fuel into the crankcase. If the piston's coming down and you're trying to push everything in the crankcase up the transfers and it's just blowing out the hole, you're going to have what we see here. That's a puddle of fuel in there. So there's the crank pin. This design of this engine is basically half a crankshaft. That crank pin is pressed in and it has come loose. And when it came loose, it was riding on that plastic cap and it wore the hole in the cap. Not a great design, but these are low-cost units. I suppose disposable. Then you have our puddle of fuel, and that's the fuel that we poured in through the carburetor. That's not anything that was pulled in through the carburetor by the piston and vacuum and atmospheric pressure. And then you have a bunch of plastic debris that's just kind of laying in the bottom of the case here. So let me show you this crank pin. This is supposed to be pressed in here. Well, I just kind of pulled it out with a needle nose pliers. There's our connecting rod. Sometimes you'll find that what's left of the crankshaft in there is kind of augured out a little bit. That pin doesn't even look like it's got any knurling on it to hold it in there. But you can see how it fits this groove perfectly because it just was riding out of the crankshaft and gouging that piece of plastic, and then it created an air leak. So there you have it. If you can't get your trimmer started and you think you've checked everything, make sure you check this, because I've seen a lot of dead units because of this problem. Thanks for watching. Later.